I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
CJ, Big Money CJ, one half of the Cap Boys. As you know, we're both wearing ball caps, as we normally do a lot on these episodes. Before we get to all the Edmonton Oilers stuff and GM stuff and Cale Makar, I want to talk about him too. And we have to talk about some stick taps because there are some people deserving of stick taps this week. I have this question for you. It has been in my mind, and I've thought about it all week, and I have the opportunity to ask you this right now. What are your thoughts on Wes McCauley, the referee?
He's awesome. I mean, first of all, he's a great referee. Like he's, if you talk to people around the game, I'd say universally respected, or as respected as someone could be in that job, because that's one of those thankless jobs. We don't know a lot of the referees nowadays. I mean, by design, right? Many, many years ago, the NHL switched to numbers on their backs instead of name bars. And it's a bit of an anonymous profession. I think it's a difficult profession. We're only talking with the referees generally when something bad happens or calls missed or something like that. But Wes McCauley manages to still have that personality, the way he's, using his microphone to announce penalties or what have you, or reviews, and brings lots of energy and is a great referee. So, I don't know him personally. I think I've met him in passing a couple times over the years, but I'm a fan. I think, like, in a weird way, I wouldn't mind a world actually where the referees had more, where we knew them better. Honestly, like I don't see the downside of that. I guess there's some downside maybe for their families or something that I'm not contemplating here, because we know fans can be quite unhinged. But like Kerry Fraser, this is predating your time, but he was a personality, he had the coiffed hair. And, he was on the other end of a missed high sticking call in game 6 of a third round series between the Leafs
fans are very upset about Kerry Fraser. He is public enemy number one.
That was 27 years ago, 29 years ago almost. And no one stopped talking about it in Toronto, like among Leafs fans. I mean, so, and Kerry's had to answer questions about that. So like, I'd actually, before I go any further, I should probably ask Kerry, like, how he feels about that. Like, was it good for him that people knew him, but then when it goes the wrong way and you're part of something like that, I just think it adds a little bit of flavor to the game. We're all characters in a play when you think about it, right? Like what sports is, it's pure entertainment. I mean, there's a lot more levels to it than that. But, like when we're covering, stories, Julian, for you, for The Athletic, or when I'm running at the Star, I mean, we're talking about the characters in a play that make it interesting and what their roles are and the twists and turns. And like the referees are part of that. But the league, it's one of the few leagues where there's no opportunity to speak to them. This has often been a touch point. It happens during the playoffs. Like there's been a few times over the years where something really controversial has happened in a playoff game. And obviously the stakes of that are quite high. And then they've made the referee available to like an NHL.com reporter who's essentially an NHL employee versus, any of the independent media. And it's a bit of it's been a tension point at times over the years, but I think it's good that when you got a Wes McCauley who seems to embrace it and like it and is really good at his job. And so that's a curveball out of the gate from you, but I hadn't thought this through.
I love the fact that it went to that point, because I could talk about referees all day. I will make the point I make the point all the time in Major League Soccer. And I've been in those press rows before where it's happened. If a controversial decision happens, a referee is available, and there's like a pool reporter among the reporters in the box who they talk to some of the other reporters. They get the questions. I'll just explain for people who don't understand, but they take questions from other reporters and they come up with like 2 or 3 that they're able to ask a referee to figure out, okay, why did this happen like this? And I've heard some colleagues say like, oh, it's not necessarily the best thing. It's still better than what is out there for the National Hockey League. And it blows my mind that a league like Major League Soccer, which we do not consider as part of the big 4 North American professional sporting leagues, has this opportunity, but the NHL does not.
Well, I can almost one-up you here. There was a baseball game in Detroit a few years ago where there's literally an obvious blown call that cost the pitcher either a perfect game or a no-hitter. Like perfect I think it was game. Like with 2 out in the 9th, like an obvious blown call. And that umpire that made that call,
Jim Joyce,
spoke to reporters or a pool reporter, because the flip side of this, of course, is that everyone that wears the stripes or is in charge of managing these games is a human. Like there's actually a human story to the umpire who blows that moment too. And what's interesting about that Jim Joyce, I wish I could remember the name of the pitcher, is I'm pretty sure those guys became friends. Like I believe it actually linked them. Like they're kind of linked by this weird moment, probably the low moment of Jim Joyce's career, you would argue, and the umpire. And I don't know how the pitcher would view that. I mean, it's kind of he still got to basically had a perfect game, but it doesn't go down in history as one. Anyway, there's a human side to it. And I think I see sports on two levels, Julian. Like there are people who love the X's and O's, of course, right? And like analytics has brought so much of a different flavored discussion to how we view the games, how we view how the teams are built, the decisions that are made. And I love that. And lots of people love that. And even, people like myself, I'm into the nuances of the salary cap and, decisions made on contracts. Like I think that all actually enriches your viewing of the sport. But then there's the human side, right? And when a guy goes from, not just a player who wears number 20 on your favorite team, and you learn that number 20, maybe has overcome cancer and come back or come through some difficult time in his life, or, what we're seeing this year more and more in hockey where, players are battling anxiety or substance use issues or things like that. And they're willing to talk about it. And then they come back and they like, I think that adds to the game too. Like the human people want to hear human stories, right? It's what reality TV is. I mean, sports is reality TV for people who like sports, and reality TV is, people are into other things, romance, like you with your Bachelorette viewings.
Hey, that ends up being more of a self-care thing than anything, just because it's a way.
And
for
I'm
me
not
to
making
just,
fun of
watch
it.
Sports. I appreciate that.
But what I'm saying is you love the human side of it, right? You can connect to it on some level, and it maybe makes you view your life in a certain way. It maybe just makes you laugh or just appreciate it, whatever. So I this is one of the things, like, now I'm way off topic. I said what I said, like we had our say on COVID and the lockdowns last episode. I have to say, before I go any further, I am totally floored by the response we got to that.
Me too.
Like my DMs were full of like really, really heartfelt, thoughtful messages. And, it reminds me of kind of like the power of our platform here. And it's cool that we can connect with people that way. And so I don't need to comment any further on that thing. But, what are we all doing here, I guess, is the point, right? Like we're all just trying to understand our lives. We're trying to understand each other. And I just think the more the leagues can allow those stories to be told, whether it is an official or players, like I don't see really how it's a bad thing. I think like the amount of bad stories that come out is like this much of a huge pool of great stories and amazing, uplifting stories. And so that's one of the things that's got me down about COVID. And this is actually no shot at the leagues or the teams or the players or anyone, but we just can't tell those stories with near the same effect because we can't get close enough to each other and have a conversation enough. Yeah. And so I don't know how long this is going to go on. I don't know what this is going to look like on the other side, but man, I hope we get back to a time when we can tell great stories about the people that play these games and that make up these leagues and that allow this to happen. Because like the games are one thing, but I think the people really resonate to the stories and all the layers beneath the games themselves.
So Wes McCauley would be one of those characters you would eventually love to be in a position to have their story told.
Sure. And I also think like if we could get to know more of the referees, it'd be great. And look, like we have this great moment coming. Like it's, I'm not sure how much you paid attention, but finally there's female officials that basically at every level below the NHL that are getting opportunities. They've done games in the American Hockey League, Ontario Hockey League, what have you. I mean, clearly what's coming is eventually we're going to have it be normalized that female officials are in the NHL. I mean, those are stories that should be told too, right? I mean, it's obvious why that would have value. But, it's not to say some of the male officials that are out there, honestly, it's my job to cover this league and I don't know very many of them. And I don't know very many of how they got there or what their backgrounds are. But, I think that there could be good stories there. And I know it's most fans only think of the official as the guy they're just yelling at least when they're allowed to go to a game, when they don't like a call made on the ice or what have you. But, I do think the human side of the game is important in the sport. And I think it's going to be more important than ever, honestly, I hate saying coming out of this. Like, I don't know if we'll ever be out of this. Like, I don't know if this is just going to be like evolutions of what our normal is, but I think these sports have to start thinking about selling themselves. And if I was in charge, I'd be finding more ways to tell the stories of the people. Cause I think ultimately when you boil it all down, all the shit, bud, we just want to know about people. We want to understand ourselves. We want to understand other people. And I think that's where the power of what we do is.
I only brought up Wes McCauley as like a fun like opener because Steve Dangle, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to get why people like Wes McCauley as much as they do. And I think he's trying to make the point that
is Steve Dangle the Grinch?
I think here's the point I think he was trying to make, to his defense. He was trying to make the point that because personalities in the NHL are not nearly as pronounced for so many of the athletes compared to other leagues, the fact that Wes McCauley, a referee among the many referees in the National Hockey League, is a personality that stands out is very like the bar is set very low for that. And I think he's trying to just like call that out and be like, what are we doing? But also at the same time, like whether or not the personalities would be great or not, like I think it's kind of funny to see a guy like Wes McCauley, announce that two guys are going to the box for fighting, or just make it seem like he's like a guy in Mortal Kombat. Like I think that's it's like a small like funny thing. Like, we don't have to make him like the king of everything. Like he's not on Gritty's level or whatever. But like it's like a fun it's a fun thing. And I love the fact that you took that into the next step, which is, it'd be great to know more about, and I'm sure people have done it, but I'd love to read a feature about why Wes McCauley has the personality that he has. But of course, because of COVID, we're in the situation that we're in right now where it's not nearly as easy to be able to like meet with people in person to tell those stories. I know we went in on that topic just a little bit in the last episode, but like, that's a genuine point. Like, I would love to read about Wes McCauley, and I know you'd be on top of that.
Well, here's the truth. So like, let's say when a player really screws up in a game, like I think it's easier to see them in a fuller picture if you kind of know them. Like, and so you don't make your whole story or your whole analysis on like this screw up. Like there might be reasons for the screw up. Just as like when something great happens, there could be reasons for that. I'll give you like a really random story. And this is going way back.
Go ahead.
But like this just jumps to my mind. And this is where like I think where our job can make it interesting for the fans. So the 2013 Leafs Bruins series, which is the one that ended with the 4-1 game 7, blah, 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 blah. But before that happened, the Leafs go to Boston for game 1. They lose, and it was pretty one-sided. And there was 2 days between game 1 and game 2, which is a little unusual. And the Leafs practiced at one of the local college rinks. And so Clark MacArthur, who was a regular member of the team, got scratched in game 1, I believe, or scratched or benched. Either way, not what you'd expect. And then I get to practice early, and like I see him in the stands with the team psychologist, like before practice. And like, this is like an hour long chat. Like, I mean, it was a long chat. And so the morning skate before game 2, I just went up to him and said, "Hey, I saw you talking to Dana. What's that about?" And he like explained that he was dealing with all like this doubt, and he's like, but I'm going to score tonight. And I think I have the details of this right. I have most of this is right. It might've been later in the series. He told me he was going to score tonight. That's the only thing I'm doubting here. But then he scored that night. And then like, I went to him after the game, and like you get you can then tell a nice story about this guy who's been dealing with whatever he was dealing with. Like, it's not just that he scored a goal, right? It's like, he's working through his problems and he's willing to share that. And like to me, like, I love knowing that kind of story, and like, I get that not everyone's open to sharing it, but we saw a goal the other night. I don't know if you saw this. Nikolai Ehlers scored into an empty net and he started crying on the bench. He kissed his stick. He started crying on the bench. And like, again, I don't know the story there, and maybe it's something he wouldn't be comfortable sharing, but clearly there's a story behind that. People don't barely even celebrate empty net goals, let alone be reduced to tears on the bench. But if he was ever in a position to share that story, I'm sure, again, it tells us something about these guys. They're not just numbers in your team's laundry. They're not even just guys we talk about on this pod going like, "Oh, he's amazing. He made this awesome move." Like, there's like a lot of human stuff behind them. And it's part of this is selfish, right? Because those are the stories I like to tell. It's what makes me interested in my job is to try to get to know the characters in the game as well as we possibly can. I still get that some of it's surface level because even in the old days, you're just talking to them in a dressing room for 15 minutes at a time. You're not really part of their life. But I'm so far off topic. I can't even you could give me Google and a GPS here and I can't get back to where you want me to, but
that's okay. Don't worry about it. I could take this from here. Here's what I'll say though. I think the fact that we were able to go in on this topic and explain why it's so important for us reporters to be able to, do our jobs correctly in terms of being there in person. That Clark MacArthur example, that can't happen on Zoom. You know what I'm saying? That cannot happen there. So I'm really glad that you were able to explain that because there may be people who don't necessarily understand why that is. For anyone who
because I know there's some young aspiring maybe reporters out there. For me, what I miss most is actually the morning skate access to the players. And so this is my view of it. Practice days are shorter days for the players, right? And it's that's usually the day between either they're traveling somewhere or they've played a game the night before. The game days are long. And so I find you can obviously have a nice conversation on a practice day, but often that's the day that guys have to deal with their personal, do their banking or go to the dentist or get groceries, that's, so it's a shorter work day. And so sometimes I find that players aren't as engaged in those days after the practice. But morning skate, all guys are doing the rest of their day is they're going to go home quickly and nap, eat, nap, and then come back to the rink at 4:00. Basically, they're not in as much of a rush. The other cool thing is, some players stay out for 5 minutes at a morning skate. Some guys stay out for 25 minutes. And so they open the dressing room and basically the whole room's there. And I found that you could always have a short discussion at minimum. It's not all Barbara Walters style Oprah, just come over to the couch and bare your soul to me. But it was always a good opportunity to have a bunch of short conversations with players. And if there's something you've seen in a game, you could bring it up. Hey, I noticed you did that the other night. What was that about? And I always found that the most valuable. And then after a game, it gives some great clips, but after a game is next to useless because players or coaches or whatever are so emotional generally. It's hard to go in on something, right? Basically you're hey, you screwed up. Why did you screw up? And then it's just I screwed up because everything sucked. I just find it's hard to really dig in on anything. And then the other classic is well, tell me about this goal you scored. And okay, some guys do a really good job of explaining what they're thinking, but the truth is some elite athletes, literally it's instinctual. It's almost, he for him, it's explaining if you're a great artist, how you painted something. Some people can explain that. Other people, it's just literally this gift that it's hard to put words to. And so I really miss the morning skate access. First of all, the morning skate too, there's the buzz of the game, right? That's, if they said you can only get back one of the things you used to have, it would be that we could be around the players in the morning skate and really chat with them. And I think that's where you can start to pull out some threads for great stories. And anyway, I used to walk uphill both ways in the snow to school as well.
50 miles.
Old man CJ, I remember when.
Oh, okay. I wanted to actually talk about a story you wrote earlier this week, which you could read on the Toronto Star. Too much of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl might be a bad thing for the Edmonton Oilers. Why did you write that? And did last night, we're doing this on Thursday, so we're referencing the Edmonton Oilers loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday night. Did that game ultimately prove your point from the headline?
Well, it wasn't a full proof, right? Because Connor McDavid entered COVID protocol and wasn't in the game. But Leon Draisaitl did play nearly 25 minutes in the game. Mm-hmm. And, I know we're going to talk about Cale Makar later. Cale Makar is having his fantastic season as a defenseman. And I know what makes him special, he's such a great skater and he does roam in areas that a defenseman typically doesn't. But Cale Makar is averaging 24 minutes a game this season. So my point is Leon Draisaitl as a forward, as a center, someone who covers the entire ice, who kills penalties, who's playing in every game state, is playing more than a defenseman in a lot of cases. And look, I have to be clear because I think there's the problem with headlines or someone who maybe reads a snapshot of that story. I think it's easy to misunderstand the point. The point first of all, is not to lay any blame at those players' skates, like whatsoever. It's not critical of their performance in the least. I think the point I was trying to make is that it says bad things about their organization that for the last 6 seasons, essentially that's been the case. I mean, there's a couple exceptions along the way, but essentially those two have been at the top of forward ice time for 6 straight years. And look at all they've done during that time is fill their trophy cabinets. Like they're winning Rocket Richards in Draisaitl's case, or, you know, Hearts and scoring titles, outright trophies for Connor McDavid. Like those guys are doing with those minutes what you'd want. But I do think there's a diminishing return to, you're getting the points from them, but, you know, what are we still talking about for that team to break through and have playoff success? And so, you know, the reason I wrote the story is there's some talk behind the scenes about that, you know, one of the problems in Edmonton isn't that those players are underperforming, but it's that they don't have enough guys lower down in the lineup to maybe just take some of the burden off them. You know, when it gets to a must-win game, absolutely play the wheels off them. But you want them to be fresh, or as fresh as can be when you get there. And we're still only like just, you know, low there's 40 odd games left in the season. The Oilers are leaking oil everywhere. And those players in this stretch where they've won 2 of 13 games, if you look at it, like they're still performing like guys who will win a scoring title, but they're not as crazy as it was before that point. And again, I'm not blaming them, but it just shows how much is being asked of them for the Oilers to have success. Like, I think it's really a criticism of the organization that they haven't found a way to be able to win games, you know, when those guys maybe are scaled back a bit. And, you know, it's easy to make a comparison to the Leafs because the Leafs have some high-end players. They played them in that game. You know, Toronto's playing Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner about 2 minutes less a night, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot over how often games are played. And the Leafs have won some games recently, even games where they scored a lot of goals, where Austin Matthews didn't score or Marner had 1 assist. Like it's not, their entire operation hasn't been reliant on, I mean, those guys win them a ton of games, don't get me wrong, but
for sure
they have more down the lineup where they can spread things around deeper. And I think that's where Edmonton has to get to, and quick. I don't think they can do it this season, but the other side of Edmonton's story, and it would be unfair to go this deep on it and not point it out. They've had horrendous injury luck, which happens. You know, they've had bad COVID luck, I would say, in the sense that it seems like they have 3 players on the COVID list at any one time, but they've never had it, you know, and again, I'm not being crass about this, but if everyone on their team is going to get it, which it kind of seems like, you'd rather almost have it all at once, because then you get shut down and then you return basically where everyone can play. They're missing 3 and 4 guys every week, but then it's a different 3 or 4 guys the next week. And so they're forever playing shorthanded because of COVID. You know, whereas a team like Toronto had, I think, 21 or 22 members of their traveling party / players all get it in a week window. They never had to play a game with all those guys out. And now they don't get tested for 90 days. Like they're on a good end of the competitive end, you know, whereas, you know, all of a sudden it's Derek Ryan and Connor McDavid, 2 of their 4 centers, and Tyson Barrie, you know, one of their top defensemen, out, you know, for the game on Wednesday. And so anyway, they've had some bad luck in there. They're not getting enough saves. I mean, it's actually crazy. So I'm not saying this is the only problem for Edmonton. I'm not saying this is why they've gone into this tail slide, but I think it's an interesting way to look at their season that, you know, I think they need to get to a point organizationally where they lean on those guys a little less during the year, try to save them for the end of the season as much as possible, you know, and try to build a deeper team. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, teams like Tampa had all kinds of weapons, right? But their third line in those last 2 cups was undeniably a huge factor in that. You know, with Coleman, Goodrow, and Gord. And so Edmonton, I mean, I'm not saying you can mimic that exact third line, but you need a third line. And I just feel like part of the reason Edmonton hasn't had it is because of these injuries. So they haven't had the full complement of forwards, but I think they also need to do a better job of building the team out. And because you get in these moments and so much is being asked of Draisaitl and McDavid, like they have to be tired. They have to be feeling a different degree of pressure. I mean, pressure's on every athlete in the sport, but
of course
they understand, like, if they're not getting 2 points each night, like the team isn't winning. It's just, it's almost a fact. Like you look at the start of the year, like Edmonton was insane. They never lost, but those guys were literally averaging 2 points a game. And now they're averaging like 1 or 0.9 or whatever during this run. And it's just not enough. And the crazy thing about their stretch where they've been losing all this, they're not getting blown out. they're not losing games 7-1. Like this, that's the flip side of this not maybe being a full panic situation. Like they're losing in the margins. And I think that's tough on those guys. And, I don't even put this on Dave Tippett. Like, I think if you're in Dave Tippett's shoes and you look down your bench, yeah, you're throwing 97 and 29 on the ice, like absolutely every minute you can, because that's probably better than the next options in your mind. But if you're Dave Tippett, are you going at Mikko Koskinen, which is actually a good segue to the next point I wanted to get at. He's been in the news obviously with what he's been saying about Mikko Koskinen after the Monday night game against the Rangers, where he said he had some bad goaltending and mentioned the brutal mistake where he mishandled the puck. 10 the goal, Dangle would say, so many people would say, he did not do that, and it resulted in a goal against. What do you think of the fact that he's put himself out there with the comments on Mikko Koskinen, the back and forth that's ensued since? I'm split on this one, Julian, because I love honesty. And, what he said, other than we all blow it up for 2 days, it's not untrue. Literally, they have a good start in a game. They need to win at Madison Square Garden, and the goalie coughs up a goal right away. And this is a team, I think it was 20 of 24 games they've given up the first goal. They feel like they're down 1-0 before the opening faceoff, this team. And then all of a sudden they're down 1-0 after a good 5 minutes or whatever it was in that game. And so I want to praise the honesty and I love that, but it does only add fire to a very volatile situation, right? Because then the next day, then they fly to Toronto. The next day of practice, he's asked about it. Then Mikko Koskinen does an interview with Tommy Seppala in Finland and said it's not nice to be, have the bus backed over you. And, they've only scored 7 goals in my last 6 losses, and I can't score goals. So now it looks like Koskinen's calling out his teammates. I'm not sure that was his intent, but I think he's probably trying to provide more nuance or facts around what's gone on. Then Dave Tippett, I actually asked him before Wednesday's game at the morning skate about, Koskinen's comments. And then he's like, well, it's taken out of context. It becomes this whole thing that at a time when you so badly need to win, when the best player on the planet goes into COVID protocol, your team is friggin' reeling. And I just think it becomes an unnecessary distraction, but I don't want to hammer them too much because, man, I'm in there asking those questions just like you. I want real answers. Yeah. I mean, that's better than all the times we get lied to, which is frequent in this job. Although I said last time anyway, but there's maybe not outright lies, but there's a lot of misdirection or whatever.
Small side note here, not to break you off here. Just want to clarify something. So were you the one who actually asked the question that led to Dave Tippett saying the quotes were taken out of context?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was your voice, because I listened back to that audio and I'm like, I wonder if that's CJ. Anyway, go ahead. My bad. Yeah. Sorry, I just want to clarify that.
Well, I'll even tell you how the sausage was made there. I was at the morning skate, of course, before the Leafs Oilers game. And, because there's no traveling media, because the Koskinen story in Finland came out about an hour before the morning skate, give or take.
Right.
That's what it came online. And so, it was pretty juicy quote from Mikko Koskinen in there. And no traveling media from Edmonton. And obviously the Toronto media is largely focused on what's going on with the Maple Leafs. There was some concern maybe that no one would pick up on that from the Edmonton angle and ask what would be an obvious question if there were Oilers media around. And so someone at TSN gave me a call and said, make sure that gets asked. So, I was comfortable doing that, of course. It's a fair question on that day. So I made sure it got asked. And he basically said, I feel like my quote was taken out of context. I was asked by the reporter about the start of that game in New York. I said it was a bad play or whatever the exact quote was. And he said Koskinen actually made some good saves down the stretch. And he's trying to smooth it out at that point. And I'm sure the damage was done. The Oilers only now play 1 game in 14 days. I don't know if you realize that.
I did not realize that.
They got 1 game against Ottawa for the next 2 weeks. I guess it's possible. I don't have any info on this, but maybe something gets rescheduled because they're a team that's had a number of games postponed. So maybe they end up playing more than that. But as of right now, they're playing 1 in 14. So, there's no goalie controversy because, Koskinen probably isn't starting that game, assuming Mike Smith's healthy. And then, we're going to be into February before there's even a start. So maybe at least now there's time for things to settle. The downside of that, Edmonton has no opportunities to pick up points for 14 days, essentially. And so they're almost certainly going to be out of a playoff spot by the time we get into February. And then they're really going to be chasing it. It's a fascinating situation. Like, this is the most urgent situation in the league right now, because that is a team that can't miss the playoffs. I still don't think they're going to miss the playoffs, honestly, but like, I think sometimes we're too quick to panic. This is like where you like take the glass case off and you are smashing that panic button. If you're like they got to make a trade, they got to do something. I mean, I think that you can't just be like, this is going to sort itself out. I mean, they tried to do that. I respect it. Again, like, they lost 2 of the games on this 5-game road trip after Christmas, in extra time, essentially. So they got a loser point, but like, they could have obviously won those games. Like, even the Toronto games, 2-2 in the third period, they lose 4-2 with an empty net goal and a power play goal against. Like, they're close. It's not like they're being embarrassed. And that was a game they played without McDavid and all this stuff, but you got to get some wins or else. Dun, dun, dun. So,
what can the Oilers do, though? Like, I mean, they don't have that much in terms of cap space. I know we've brought up the fact that there are goalies out there for them to get. We've mentioned the defense that needs some help as well, and there are options there too. I'm just curious what Ken Holland can actually do with the situation at hand. Like, what do you think he'd have to do in order to improve his team?
Well, Marc-Andre Fleury, we've talked about him to Edmonton a long time. Like, I think there could be some nervousness on the Oilers' end of things with him, just because he's an older goalie, as Mike Smith is, just about having, just some of that unpredictability about that. I don't know for sure that Marc-Andre Fleury, who has a no-move clause, would waive his no-move to go to Edmonton, maybe especially among these circumstances. Maybe Adam Wilde can ask the agent provocateur at some point.
L'agent provocateur!
Although I'm guessing that Alan doesn't want to share his client's private business on his podcast.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
But, I think that he's sort of the most obvious candidate here. Like, because how many good goaltenders or great goaltenders would ever be traded at this point in the season? Like, there's just not very many. There's lots of great goaltenders around the league. Those teams aren't trading them, even for a haul. I think getting a goaltender, like stabilizing that position, would be a big first step. And that's not to place all the losing on the goalie, but I feel like that's where a situation where you could make one move that makes a tangible difference, like immediately. They're also looking for a third line center. I don't know who that player is. I'm not sure that player is coming through the door in 2 weeks, but even if they get that guy in a trade next week, just for argument's sake, I don't know that I think over time, that's a move that will pay off, but I'm not sure that pays off in terms of winning games right now, reversing the slide. And so I think if there's something that can be done in net, that's where you start. And then, of course, the other button that we touched on is do you fire the coach? I mean, that's the other one move you could make that might have a tangible change in the mood around the team or deployment or what have you. But beyond that, man, I mean, you're just hoping. You just hope the guys figure it out. I mean, maybe only having one game in 14 days could be a good thing.
That's true.
Like, just a chance to refresh, get healthy, clear the minds. Maybe they'll start fighting back against the media. I don't know. Like, they need to rally around some cause here, right? And maybe it's that.
This podcast is sponsored by Manscaped. Cheers to 2022 and resolutions you can actually keep. I know I'm more of a goals person, but resolutions regarding Manscaped, I think those are some pretty good ones you can keep. How about having clean and shiny balls all year round? Our sponsors at Manscaped are here to save your balls this year and make the ball drop into 2022 the cleanest and sexiest ever. Set your first New Year's resolution with good intentions and join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code CHRIS21 for 20% off free shipping. They've got some pretty great products. I tried to show some on the last time I did a Manscaped ad, and Jesse thought I was wilding out a little bit, but I'll tell you, man, the shavers, the creams, the wipes even are really great. Some great stuff from Manscaped. Get 20% off free shipping with the code CHRIS21 at manscaped.com. 20% off free shipping. Sorry, 20% off with free shipping. 20% off free shipping would be okay, but 20% off with free shipping, excellent. And all you have to do is go to manscaped.com and insert the code CHRIS21. New year, no pubes in 2022 with Manscaped. Does this sound familiar to you? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another one that lets you stream your favorite shows, and you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment that you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no juggling remotes, and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. This doesn't normally happen when we're recording, but news has broken. The Providence Bruins have signed Tuukka Rask to a professional tryout agreement. He's been skating with the Bruins for the better part of the last how many weeks, and the Bruins have made it official. They have found a way to bring him back into the fold. This literally just broke like a couple minutes ago. I don't know if instant analysis from our Chris Johnston on Tuukka Rask signing a PTO with the Providence Bruins, the AHL affiliate.
I followed the story and been in touch with the people that would know what's going on. It's just a sign that Tuukka Rask doesn't want to play anywhere else. I mean, it's perfect timing. I mean, if Edmonton needs a goalie, if Tuukka was in a position where he was willing to sign with another team, why not him? There would be worse ideas for getting on Nav. But Tuukka stayed living in Boston. He's drafted by the Leafs, but never played for the Leafs. He's been a lifelong Bruin. And he stayed living in Boston this whole time. He was working out at their practice facility as he was rehabbing from his hip surgery in the summer. I mean, it's pretty clear. I guess if there was a world where the Bruins got to this stage of the season and didn't want to sign him, he would probably sign somewhere else. But it's been pretty clear his preference has been to remain a Bruin. This is the first step to getting back there. Obviously allows him to play games for Providence, practice formally with the P Bruins. And, at some point and I don't think it'll be too long, probably next week, he's going to get an NHL contract with Boston. And, it's big ad for the Bruins. Like the Bruins probably aren't they're probably not as top tier contender as they've been for a number of seasons, but I still think they're kind of hanging around there if certain things fall into place. Like it's been a strange year for them. They got off to a slow start. They had no games. Like the way the scheduling worked, they were like one of those teams that hadn't played any games in October, barely, compared to everyone else. And I don't think they found the right rhythm. They've had injuries and the whole thing, but they're still they're making the playoffs. And, Linus Ullmark, who they signed in the offseason to a decent ticket as a goaltender, had a slow start, but he's come around. I know they really like Jeremy Swayman. They're, a young goaltender in their organization. And now they got Rask. I mean, we're talking about Edmonton not having enough goaltending. That's going to be an embarrassment of riches for them. It's just about, I guess, finding the right reps for everyone and have that situation work out well. But yeah, Tuukka Rask will be back in the NHL this year. It's a cool story. At some point, I think it was a pretty significant hip surgery he had, torn labrum, was it? And at his age, I think when he went through that procedure, he wasn't 100% sure if he'd play again after, just depending on how he felt and all that. So, happy to see him continue on. Could be a cool story if the Bruins kind of have one of these Cinderella runs at a point where no one's talking them up as a contender.
So you mean so if the Bruins end up in the playoffs, and I don't know how they would make it work, but what if they end up in a wild card spot and they go up against the Leafs, who are maybe a division champion? Jeez, I'm not even going to ask that question.
Well,
I feel bad.
I just assume it's going to happen. I just assume. I don't know. I haven't studied the standings, and there's still more than half a season to play.
Oh yeah.
So it's almost pointless to study. But I assume that's how the universe is going to play this out. I mean, it just feels like every year it's Leafs Bruins. So, and I know it's actually been a couple seasons. The Leafs played Columbus in 2020 and then Montreal, but yeah. I mean, for the Leafs, they have to slay their beast at some point, right? And I'm not saying they will, but that would be how they have to view that. So
Can I tell you a really jerk thing I did over the holidays with regards to Tuukka Rask? I went to a store doing some last minute Christmas shopping. I think it was at the Bay, and they had a whole bunch of these figures of these NHL players, and there was one of Tuukka Rask alone on a shelf, and I sent a photo of it to Steve Dango, and I was like, this guy was a Leaf. Would you want this as a late Christmas gift? He responded, Merry Christmas, asshole. Sorry, my bad. I wasn't trying to be mean.
Do you know my best Tuukka Rask story is that he is an avid tennis player when he's not playing hockey. And at some point he was in a bar in Finland, and I can't remember the name of the Finnish professional tennis player, but a bet was launched that the Finnish professional tennis player could beat Tuukka Rask playing with a frying pan and Tuukka using a tennis racket. And I believe Tuukka lost to him with the guy using a frying pan. And from what I know, the frying pan still hangs above the bar because it's like this sort of legendary thing. And like what I love about Tuukka, first of all, I love Finns. Like I love Finns. Like Finns from the outside, and obviously I'm being very general. Not every Finn is the same, but I think if we can speak in some generalities just to illustrate the point, they tend to be kind of serious when you don't know them. But the minute you crack the veneer of a Finn, it's like the warmest, most like light. I mean, they can be dark people, like they live in a dark place, right? Like they're shaped by, like in the winter, like there's almost no sun and like lots of parts of Finland. Like it can be a tough life there. And like they value this thing called sisu, right? It's like, it's the Finnish word for like the spirit to like battle through hard things, like a long, dark winter. But like they have this sisu? SISU. Sisu.
Okay, I've seen that before.
Yeah, it's like it's I don't have the perfect explanation, but it's something that like Finns value in themselves, that they have this strength to get through hard things. Essentially, it's a spirit, right? It's a reminder that because they do live in a very intemperate climate, and it's a challenge, right? There's no sunlight anyway, but there's like a great sense of humor among Finns. That's what I love. Like just like can laugh at themselves more than anyone in the world, or as much as anyone in the world that I've been around. And so like Tuukka Rask always has had that kind of lighthearted, can poke fun at himself. You've seen the clips from back in the days, like throwing his goalie stick after losing shootouts and stuff like, but he always can have a chuckle. And I think this is safe now. I mean, if not, Jesse, you can cut this part out. But a few years ago, when the Leafs and Bruins are playing a playoff series, the Bruins did a media avail. So it's an off day in the series at their hotel, like around noon. And so like we all the media went to the hotel. It's like second floor conference room, whatever. We do a media availability, come down to the lobby. And I look over in the lobby bar and there's Tuukka Rask in the middle of a playoff series, like drinking like a vodka soda at the bar. And I'm like, what a badass. Like he's not hiding, right? Like the whole team management could walk by. I'm not saying he got hammered, but he's sitting there in the middle of a playoff series, like drinking like a vodka soda or something. Like
he's enjoying himself.
Well, yeah. And I just think sometimes, anyway, I don't know if that's offside. I'm really not trying to say anything bad. Like I thought like, what a badass.
I don't think that's offside. You spotted a guy hanging out.
And guess what? I can't remember what year that was, but I do know the Bruins won the series because they've won a couple in a row against the Leafs. So, you know, Tuukka performed well enough. He still did his job despite that one vodka soda on an off day.
2 quick questions before we get to stick taps. Here's the first one. Which of these 3 teams will get their general manager first? The Vancouver Canucks, the Anaheim Ducks, or the Montreal Canadiens?
Vancouver. You know, Jim Rutherford wants someone in place by February. You know, we're first week into January. I think the other 2 situations, you know, Montreal's got going now where they're starting to get permission needed. They're starting their interview process over Zoom. You know, I guess it's possible that concludes within 3 weeks. You know, in Anaheim's case, they've built this sort of blue ribbon panel with Scott Niedermayer and Paul Kariya and a few other members of the organization that are going to sort of conduct that process. Like, I think that they're more at the beginning stage. So if I was to do a power rankings of likely order of play here, I'd say Vancouver's GM first, Montreal's GM second, Anaheim's third. You know, that could change. I mean, I suppose the one thing that could change that is if 2 or all 3 of those organizations end up honing in on the same candidate, and that could change the urgency to a decision. But I actually don't sense that to be the case. Obviously, there'll be some overlap in what they're talking about. You know, in Vancouver, there seems to be at least an idea that Patrick Elvin is the favorite for that job. You might remember actually when Jim Rutherford left the Penguins, Patrick Alvin was briefly their interim general manager. He's been a long time, scout and key person in the Penguins organization. So someone Jim Rutherford got to know well. And so, it's not to say he's got the job, but I could see him ending up in Vancouver. Obviously we're talking about a French speaker, being the general manager in Montreal. And so unless that French speaker happens to be Martin Madden, who works for the Ducks, and if the Ducks want to hire him, that could change the order. But, that's how I see that going. But all three processes have started now. And so lots of interviews happening and exchanging of info. And I expect we'll get some clarity perhaps before the end of the regular season with all three situations.
I'm still a bit surprised that Martin Madden wasn't, there was a list of candidates that were brought up for the Canadiens job and Martin Madden wasn't there. So I was just presuming that he's more interested in the Anaheim job.
Well, I don't know the exact structure of his contract, but it's possible in season the Ducks don't want to give him the chance to have that conversation. And that's, again, depending on what his contract language is, that in certain cases that's fully acceptable. I mean, because he's a key member of their front office. Let's say he's hired a month before the trade deadline, just for argument's sake, by another team. I mean, that's not a loss you want to have. Just as sometimes a scouting director, like you're not going to let him go to another team in May, right before the June draft, or this year it's a July draft. But, so sometimes the timing of these things might dictate why that is. And look, there's nothing to say the Canadians won't wait until later on, until there's a time for him. We'll see. I get this. Montreal is the hardest one for me to handicap because I do think they're going to draw from a pretty large group of candidates, and they might hire someone that we're not even talking about. My point is, it's not guaranteed 100% to be Matthew Darche or Roberto Longo, Daniel Briere. There could be a curveball in that situation, I think.
It could be Marc Denis. I've heard people locally hype up Marc Denis. For people outside of Quebec who don't really know what he's been up to, Marc Denis, longtime NHL goaltender, now works at LDS as an analyst, but he's been around a lot of different franchises in the QMJHL, and a lot of people seem to respect his hockey acumen. I've heard his name being propped up in local media circles as a genuine candidate for that job, and I believe his name was mentioned among some of the ones that could be getting an interview. So I like, that's a name, if in terms of kind of out of left field, that I think I would put him out there.
Useless trivia. Marc Denis was Canada's goaltender at the 2006 World Hockey Championship. And I only know this because I was the first major event I covered back for CP in Riga, Latvia. And I was a very, very green young reporter. And Marc Denis was a starting goalie. Brendan Shanahan was a captain of that team.
2006.
You might have heard of their young guns line with Sidney Crosby, who is, I think, that was the end of his first season in the NHL. Patrice Bergeron and Brad Boyes.
Brad Boyes.
Yeah,
That's a blast from the past.
What a life experience for me. They got totally jobbed. In the anyway, I won't go through that. They ended up, they lost the bronze medal game, but they got jobbed in the semifinal against Sweden. Crosby literally went end to end off an opening faceoff in the third period, scored a goal, and while he was celebrating, a Swedish guy like cross-checked him in the face, like actually. And like there was like no penalty. Anyway, it's a crazy game, and Canada lost. And then they had to play the bronze medal game like 15 hours later. Like Canadian teams don't show up for bronze medal games as it is. But like, why was there not at least a day off? Anyway, it was a great life experience for me. The coach of the team was Mark Habscheid, and he was very unhappy with something I did. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he didn't like about it's nothing. It's just the sort of stuff that happens. But the way I'd covered one of the games, like something I'd written or something, I just remember the PR guy calling me in before the bronze medal game and being like, yeah, you might want to tread lightly here on this.
Okay. Future episode, Tales from Riga, Latvia.
Oh man, I actually
Chris
have another
Johnston.
great story from there, but we'll save it for the future.
Save that. Okay. The second question I wanted to bring up before Stick Taps, where are you ranking Cale Makar's wonder goal against Chicago from earlier this week in terms of goal of the year candidates? I mean, we already have a pair from Connor McDavid. We have the dish again from Zegras and Sonny Milano. And now we have Cale Makar turning on a dime, making Kirby Dach look like a fool, and then going forehand, backhand on Marc-Andre Fleury and winning a game in overtime.
I don't know where to put it among those ones yet. I'm going to take the fifth on that. But do you know what that play reminded me of like what a basketball play might be like, right? Like shaking off his defender and then sort of driving the net.
Going baseline.
It was awesome. Like what a goal. But like that was what was cool about it. I mean, first of all, he's a defenseman, right? And I'm not saying, look, there's been lots of skilled defensemen. We've just lived through Erik Karlsson. Like him in his glory years was ridiculous. Drew Doughty. Like there's players, even Mike Green, if you go far enough back, like Mike Green had a 31 goal season where in like 68 games or something. Like, and I get some of that was power play driven and all that stuff, but like we've seen lots of defensemen, I guess, with skill, but the way he like shakes off Doc and makes it move, like he's got 14 goals, I think, in 25 games this year, 11 even strength goals. I mean, it's cool. It's like a player that's impacting the game in a way you wouldn't necessarily expect for like what the position he plays and all that. And that goal itself was outrageous. You know, I saw it everywhere too. Like it, you know, again, it's sort of like your dish again, like that starts to reach a bit beyond just the normal people that are interested in a hockey highlight. And so I don't know if it was, I don't want to do better there. Like, I know you want me to, but like, I can't, it's hard. There's all so different. I can't put it this way. It's in the top three. I don't know how to order the three yet, but I can't think of anything that knocks it out that we haven't talked about this year. And yeah, Makar's having a season for the ages. Like, you know, I hate getting ahead of ourselves on awards voting. Like, I feel like the media does that all the time, but yeah. I mean, between him and Hedman, it could be an interesting Norris case, but I think, and there'll be some other guys there when it matters, but Makar is the real deal. What a player.
All hail Cale Makar.
Yes,
all
sir.
right, let's get to stick taps. Do you want to start? Should I start? I think there are quite a few. I mean, there are a few people I think are deserving of stick taps. I don't know if you had one of them in mind or if you had someone else in mind. I could get one off the schneid here if you want me to start.
No, I think I'll give my tap to Chantal Machabée, who is a trailblazer in media circles around Montreal, as you would know. You know, one of the first, if not the first, female on-air talent, I believe, covering sports, and has been around a long time. Just the classiest lady ever. You know, I've gotten to know her well over the years professionally, and named the vice president of the Canadiens, communications department. I just think it's cool. I mean, I like when people try new things. You know what I mean? And certainly, she's not the first sort of journalist / reporter to jump and do a communications role. But you know, I'm sure she'll do great in that position. I was happy to see that announcement. So félicitations, Chantal. Pardon pour my crappy French. Just an awesome lady. I was happy to see that. And, you know, I think we should all remember, because, you know, Chantal's getting somewhere near the back nine of her career. I won't make that decision for her, but it's never too late to try new things. You can have a new chapter in your life. And I think it'll be cool to see her in that role after many years at RDS, owning the beat there.
For people who are not familiar with her work, this is somebody who has been around for over 30 years on Quebec, just reporting circles and sports media. Literally the most respected colleague on the Canadiens beat. I've heard stuff about everybody else, but Chantal is someone I've heard like nobody disrespect amongst media colleagues, very little among fans. She's just somebody who just commands respect wherever she goes. So I too would like to express my congratulations to her on her getting that opportunity with the Montreal Canadiens. Félicitations à vous, Chantal. Vraiment cool to see you get that job. It's really great to see her get
just
that.
Put me to shame with your French, you jerk.
French immersion, baby. My stick tap goes to Nadia Popovici, the Seattle Kraken fan who notified a Vancouver Canucks equipment manager of a cancerous mole on their neck earlier this week. I think they were just behind them on the bench. They noticed a mole on their neck. They wrote a message on their phone and tried to get their attention. and let them know that there was something pretty dangerous. And I believe the Kraken and the Canucks, they came together and gave her some money to go
$10,000 towards her. She's a med school student. What a story this is. It's amazing.
That's incredible. It's one of the best stories from the NHL season so far. And just, wow. I think that's just incredible and really a blessing that was spotted the way that it was. So Nadia, you deserve the biggest of stick taps from us here, because that is an incredible story.
And bookends on today's pod, because that's a human story, right? That's what I'm talking about. That's something real that we can all identify with on a certain level and warms your heart. And it comes right at New Year's. What a perfect thing. I'm with you. So stick taps, Nadia.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for our Thursday edition of the CJ Show. Very action-packed. A lot of juicy nuggets in terms of news to kind of delve through and go back into. I really enjoyed today's episode. I had a really good feeling today was going to be a good one, and I was not proven wrong. I hope you feel the same, CJ.
Yeah, I loved it. It's we're rolling, bud. New year, new us. Let's keep it going.
New year, new us, but also low-key same us in some ways, but also a lot of new us. Anyway, join us on Discord, sdpn.ca. Click the link on the website page to join the Discord. Subscribe to the SDPN YouTube page. Subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And it is not too early to get your questions in for Ask CJ. We will get them in for Monday's edition. And also, CJ will get some of them into his Inside the NHL column, which you can read at the Toronto Star, and subscribe to The Athletic, because subscribing at The Athletic is pretty cool to do as well. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long and peace.
Shout out Discord crew.
Shout out the Discord crew.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the Game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.